Hey listeners, I'm your host, Juan Collado Díaz, and this is Político. Hey listeners, and welcome once again to another episode of Político. I am your host, Juan Collado Díaz, and with me I have Lura Forcum. She is the president of the Independence Center, and their mission is simple. They want to create independent resources for independent voters and create an alliance with third parties so they can prevent the overtake of the two-party system. It is time to organize, and Lura is an amazing part of this movement. The Independence Center's mission is to be a resource hub and champion for the million of Americans who believe that they share common ground and are willing to leave the political partisan behind. So Laura, thank you so much for joining me. Can you share a little bit of what brought you into the political arena and your experience in politics with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lura Forcum. I'm the president of the Independent Center. And I don't actually have a background in politics. My background is in consumer psychology and public policy. I've spent a lot of time over my career when I wasn't a marketing professor. I spent time trying to figure out how you communicate with people about different policy issues and get them interested and get people engaged in policy conversations, even when it's something that, maybe superficially isn't very interesting to people. So I joined the Independence Center because I wanted to work on the issue of getting more people involved in politics overall, but also just in policy conversations in a nonpartisan way.
Okay, so now when we talk about, the partisan aspect of things, we've seen in the past, probably 8-9 years, everything has become so partisan. It's either you're left or right. You have to be there's no such a thing as a centric anymore. There's not such a thing as an independent anymore. If you're not either left or right, you're left out of the conversation. Do you think a lot of the work you do is important in that reason because we bring voice to the people and less to the parties?
Yes. Yeah. So you're right that things have gotten really partisan and it's become it's had some kind of surprising side effects, I think, because, I was just thinking about the way the conversation about Joe Biden recently, right? And his fitness to run and his current health. And it's what a lot of Democrats are saying is well, we felt like we couldn't question whether he was okay. That conversation wasn't allowed. So it's partisanship is even determining what questions you're allowed to ask. And what we find when we talk to independent voters and people who are just independent minded is that they have questions and they feel like their questions are what make them not be able to be part of the party. Because it's if you're a partisan, this is the way we think. We all think the same way. And if you don't think like us, you don't belong here. So what we think is really healthy for democracy is for people who are not partisan, people who do have questions, to be encouraged to participate and engage politically, because they actually bring a lot of accountability to the process. Because, if you're just dyed in the wool kind of partisan, then it's well, yeah, whatever my party does is fine. And if they don't deliver on what they said, I'm probably not going to switch sides, right? Because we've made partisanship so overwhelmingly important in our political participation. So if you want people to really hold politicians to account, those are going to have to be the nonpartisan voters. And I think another thing that's really important to say about independents and how we define them is we're talking about people not just who vote for a third party candidate, but also people who swing vote and split ticket vote, because those are the people who they care about an issue, they care about certain qualities in elected officials more than they care about which party they belong to.
So with that, so we have seen it now where if you say online or anywhere that you voted, for example, myself, I'm very open about my voting in the past, and I have voted third party for the last 2 elections to my knowledge, where I have not decided to vote either left or right, but I have voted left or right on issues. But I noticed that people people, as you said, they're very, very partisan. So they vote, they may vote all blue even if they don't agree with something. And it is because they want to follow that specific party guideline, or follow, like, if they're Democrat, they're going to vote all blue. If they're Republican, they're going to vote all red. Do you think there's a way to encourage people and move them forward, to remove them of that mindset and kind of bring a new mindset to where you can vote, you can vote red on this issue, you can vote blue on that issue? Is there like something we can do as everyday people?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, just having this identity and mindset of like, it's possible to participate politically as an independent and as somebody who split ticket votes, right, and swing votes. I think just like that conception of yourself is actually really important, because if people are used to thinking about political participation in terms of only the two parties, then it's a mindset thing, right? And that absolutely affects your behavior. And then the other thing that I think is really important, and we're starting to see more of it, and I actually thought it was really cool, the person on your show who was talking about OpScore, the opportunity score. So that was really cool to me, because that's something we try to do at the Independence Center too, is say, well, you tell us what issue is important to you, and then we can tell you how a specific policy relates to that value, right? So if you have a concern with affordability, we can tell you how different types of, approaches to housing policy, or, tax bills, entitlement reform, insurance reform, right? Like, we can tell you how all of those things tie into affordability. So I think it's also trying to get better informational resources to people so that they can be informed beyond what the party says. Because I think a lot of times, like, the partisan conversation about the issue is kind of crazy. And that's why people don't want to participate, right? Because it's like the partisan conversation around something like climate is crazy, right? Like, on one side, you have people saying, like, this is a major problem, we have to do something about it right now. And the other side of that conversation is, no, everything is fine, right? And it's like, the truth of it is something more complicated than that. And you can say that for all kinds of policy issues, right? Where the partisan conversation is just a crazy one. And what we need to do is invite people into the conversation who are going to say things like, okay, well, it's complicated, and we need to balance all these different considerations.
Absolutely. I think one thing you mentioned, and we've seen a lot, and like, even, with the opportunity score in that last episode, one of the things that I noticed after I did so much research before and after, and I noticed that it's something that we need. It's something that educating people, and, the work you guys do is something also so important, because a lot of the people just look at, as I mentioned before, left or right. And because I'm a Democrat, I'm going to vote all red. And I'm blue. And if I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote all red. And it's like, where is the identity in the person? Where our identity has gone to, where we are so partisan? And, when I work on another show called Green Arenas, and it's all about the environmental things happening. And one of the problems that we have faced is that there's a lot of partisan politics in environmental issues. There's a lot of partisan politics, even in like racial issues and economic issues. And some of these things are things that shouldn't have partisan politics. There should be an independent issue where we look at it and it's like, there shouldn't be a left or right, into this. We should be all independent and look at this from the eyes of, our politics should not be involved. So I noticed with a lot of that. So now let me ask you, relating like the Independence Center, when voters comes to you guys, what is the way that you guys work with voters to make sure that, like, if they look at things to a nonpartisan way and they look more as an independent to it? Like issues, candidates, etc.
Well, so we are a 501c3, which means we're mainly an educational organization. And what we can do is offer them information to either help flesh out kind of what the two parties are not saying about a particular policy issue. And the other thing that we do a lot of is help people understand how to participate as an independent in their state, because all of the states have different rules about voter registration, and it can be really confusing to know, excuse me, like, what should my voter ID process be like, or my voter registration be like? So we also provide a lot of information about how you register to vote as an independent in your particular state. And not all states have party identification on their voter IDs, on their voter registration process. So we just help provide some clarity about like, what are the different procedures in your state? Would you be able to vote in a primary? How can you vote in the primary if you're an independent?
Yeah, so I had the problem like that in Ohio. I live in Ohio, and when I was registering to vote, I had the problem that when I registered as a nonpartisan, so independent, many years ago. When I went to vote, I couldn't vote on a primary issue because I either needed to be registered left or right to get the ballot. And if I was registered either party, I would have got a different ballot on the issue that would explain something different. And I was like, whoa, like that's so ridiculous. I had to end registering under a party and then unregistered, or like take my registration down and then register again as a nonpartisan independent, which was a lot of work to do just to vote on one issue. So I noticed that many states have that. Is there a way? Is there like a way that we can do like legislation, or people can come together to actually encourage their states to create more independent ballot access?
Yeah, absolutely. There's an organization called Open Primaries that's working on that exact issue that you talked about, trying to address primary voting in states where they have a closed primary like that. And I think it's really important to note that like that's Ohio's procedure, but you know, every state is a little bit different. There are states where you can vote in either primary, but like you have to vote in the same party's primary if there's a runoff. There are states where you, like you said, you can't vote if you're an independent in a primary. There are states where they allow independents to pick one. So it's very complicated, and it's a really important issue, I think, for getting better representation for independents. And one of the things that's, I think, incredibly important about this primary reform and about independence in general is that younger voters are the ones who tend to be independents. So it's 52% of millennials, 52% of Gen Z. And if the system is making it hard for them to vote, then they're like systematically disenfranchising younger voters. And that is a major concern. So that's one of the things too that's really important to our mission, is like we want to make sure people who are not partisans are able to participate in the democratic process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as you said, like I think one of the things that we've seen is the younger voters. You know, myself, I'm only 24. I'm Gen Z, and I noticed that a lot of my my colleagues, my friends, are very independent in their vote. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go either left or right because they're tired of the two-party system. And I mean, it's not just the Gen Z millennial. I've also seen like Gen X and baby boomers that are like they're done. They're ready to just move on from this two-party like fiasco, this two-party circus and they have going on, and they're ready. And we've noticed how the state and like the government pretty much like this election like systems are making it impossible to not get out of the two-party system. And we've seen it in the like past two elections where we have had amazing third-party candidates that have not made it anywhere in the ballot. They have not made it to stages to like go into the debates. They have not gone any farther. Do you think that in part a lot of the problems that we're seeing is because the two-party system has become so predominant, and then like we're not seeing change because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like one of the few things the two parties can agree on is that they don't want any kind of third party challenging them. They don't want any kind of competition. They don't want open primaries. I think what they've managed to do over time is protect themselves from any kind of challenger or competition. They've set the rules of the game so that it's just these two players, right? They're the only game in town. They get all the donations, right? Like they control who runs. They have all of this power. They've driven out of political participation more moderate voices, right? So they're just left with their really small bases of people who support them. And then it's like they don't even have to take into consideration the preferences of all these other people. The problem with that plan is that you can no longer win an election in many states and you know the presidency to some extent you can't win without independence. So this is a block of voters that I think the party system kind of looks at, and they're like, oh, they'll come home. They're going to come back to one of our sides one of these days. But what we want to do by enfranchising independent voters is actually like force them to compete, because we think like that's where you get accountability, is by saying, well, in order to win, you're going to have to tell independents specifically how your policies are going to speak to their issues. And then you're going to have to deliver on that stuff. And partisans don't care if you deliver. Partisans are just like, they're your ride or die, right? Like they're part of the tribe. They don't really care about the details. It's independents who are the ones who are like, no, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we're seeing, what we saw actually in the last election itself, where a lot of the independents look at things and they were like, we're tired. Like we are tired of seeing the White House as a circus, or seeing the White House as a joke. And that's where like the outcome of this election had turned that way, because the people, like a lot of people, were just tired of seeing what was really going on. And I think that they made their voice heard by going out and vote. I think this, if I'm correct, this last election was one of the like higher voter ratings that we have ever seen in like this modern like times, because people were tired. And I think a lot of people who were just like us, that did not have a left or right like vision and were more independent, went out and voted because they were just afraid of what would be next. I don't think in my lifetime, or like in your lifetime, which I've actually seen a president in office died of like age or died of like any of the stuff, to where the possibility was getting higher and higher, and the Democrats themselves were just looking strongly at pretty much keeping that person in the White House, and the Republicans were just screaming and just making everything about like themselves and how the last election was still stolen, or they still think so. So it's like a really big situation where, thanks to independent voters, we were able to kind of create a fair election. I feel that without the independent voters, this last election wouldn't really have been fair to anybody, because the Democrats and the Republicans were too much into their brains and their minds, and they weren't really thinking of everybody else.
Yeah, they've shut off feedback from everybody who's not part of the party, right? As they were like, oh, we're just not going to listen. And I think that's why the outcome of the last election was hard for people to predict. I think a lot of people were surprised that Donald Trump won. And, yes, in retrospect, I think it's really clear that independents, if you ask them, when we polled them around the time of the election, like, what is most important to you? And the thing they kept talking about was affordability. And the Democratic platform was like, oh, we're fine, right? Like, you're fine. The economy is fine. Don't worry, right? And I think that that's really what drove independents to come out and vote. And I think casting a vote for Trump was because they're actually hearing somebody reflect their concerns and say, like, yeah, you're right. The economy could be better, and here's what we're going to do about it. And now that he's in office and he's taking different actions that have an economic impact, these are the voters that are watching what he's doing. And right now they're kind of like shaking their heads, and they're like, hey, this is not what we asked for, right? Like, you said you'd address affordability, you said you'd address inflation, and those things aren't changing. So in the midterms, in the next presidential election, it's going to be independents who are like, well, what happened? What's going to be different? What are you going to do for me? So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And so with that, with that part of elections and stuff, how can the independent center help those like independents that are looking towards like the next election, or looking into, they may be confused of what's going on right now? Things like I was reading a little bit of the independent center blogs, and I see blogs on like the tariffs. I seen blogs on like the party, I've seen like the insurance parts and stuff. So how can the independent center help like through that, and also with other education to like educate people that may not be so like knowledgeable of the current like political stance in the country, or like the tariffs and stuff like that going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, this stuff is incredibly complicated, right? And like, we definitely understand that not many people have time to spend out of their day trying to understand like what is the real economic impact of tariffs, and how is a tax cut going to help me? Is it going to impact me? And so we try to share information and help people find the subjects that are important to them, right? So if you are an entrepreneur and you care about policies that relate to your ability to like create a business or grow your business, like we have things like that. What we'd like to start doing this year is having some in-person meetings, because I think what's really important in this instance is like people who are Democrats or Republicans know that they're Democrats or Republicans. And one of the ways they like know that is because they have family and friends around them who are like, we're also Democrats and Republicans, like we're doing this together. So we want to get together people, like even just small groups of people in different states across the country, so they can meet each other and recognize like there are other people like us, like we're a community. There's something here that's more than just the screen. So we want to be able to have those in-person meetings. The other thing that we want to start doing is making it easier for people to see where the current elected officials are doing good stuff that is what independents want, and be able to recognize it. So one of the things that we see in our polling a lot is that independents want to see bipartisan governing. Actually, across the board, when we poll people of all political parties, they say they want to see people working across the aisle in Congress. And there's a surprising amount of stuff that does happen across the aisles, bipartisan governing that happens. And it's really not covered in the news, I think, because like it just doesn't get a lot of like, doesn't get shared. People don't comment on it. It's just not exciting if it's not dramatic and partisan. And so we want to give people a way to be able to find out when that's happening and like reinforce to elected officials, like, oh, I saw you did this and I appreciate this. This is what I'm looking for as an independent.
Absolutely. And so if people were to want to get involved with the Independent Center, how can they do that?
Yeah, so our website is www.independencenter.org. You can go to independencenter.org/declare. And one of the things we've done lately is ask people to like declare their independence. So if you're like, hey, I'm an independent, I'm not a member of either of these parties, right? Like we would love to hear from people who, and just like, what is the thing that makes you say you're an independent? Like, that's what we're really curious about. When did you know you were an independent, or how, or why? We also have parts of our website where we're sharing, ways you can get involved, anything from donating to just like reach out. People have been emailing us lately and saying like, hey, I would be willing to host an event, or, hey, I'm an expert in this, in the graphic design. I would love to help you if you need help. So there's a place where you can get involved, and we're just like, yeah, if you want to kick in a few bucks, that would help us. If you want to participate in, we do individual interviews and focus groups. So if you want to get on one of those, you can do that too. Lots of different ways to get involved. We're just kind of like cobbling it together, trying to like get a movement going, really.
Absolutely. And so I'm assuming this is like, how long has been the Independent Center has been actually out there?
We're very new. We're like a little over a year old. And I just started in December. So I've only been out this for about 6 months. And we're a pretty small group. We're just getting going.
Well, that is amazing. I've seen a lot of the work that you guys have shared and stuff, and it's really good, really amazing. And for those that are like listening from home, you can also find the links and stuff in the show notes, which more information that would get you involved with the Independent Center, or also like their social media and stuff, so you can follow around all around. I'm pretty sure you guys are. I see on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Reddit, right?
Yeah, we are. Let's see, we're on LinkedIn too, and I think that's everything.
Yeah. So, and I see on Reddit, I see that people can also go and share their declare your independence story on the Reddit channel, which I think that is really cool.
Yeah, we would love to hear from people, and we're going to share some of those that we've collected, because it's just cool to hear, like, what was it that made you say, like, you know what, I'm actually an independent.
And what kind of like stories, I guess, you looking for from people when they're like they want to declare their independency from like any party? What kind of stories are you looking for the most?
I mean, we're trying to learn from this community and listen to them. That's one of our like main values, is that like we're not here to tell people how to vote or tell people what the right answer is to a particular policy. We really want to understand what's important to independents. And this is another place where we're just like, we're here to listen. We want to hear what you have to say. It's really interesting. Like, I typically hear one of two things when people are like, I declare my independence. They're saying like, either I cannot stand either one of these parties, they're both terrible. Or a lot of times what people will say is, there are things I like from both and there are problems I have with both. And so I don't want to be in one or the other. I think the other thing that concerns people a lot of the time is that, the parties talk to each other and talk about each other like only one side can be right, only one side can win. We're going to win now. We're going to do all the stuff we want. And then when the other party comes into office, they're like, it's our turn. We're going to change everything back. And nobody works like that in their normal life. Like in your job, in your family, in your community, you don't go around saying like, well, we're totally right and you're totally wrong and we have to win or everything's over, right? Like in the rest of your life, you're like, no, let's work together and solve our problems and come to an agreement. And I feel like a lot of the time what independents are saying is like, why can the parties not act like everybody else does in their everyday life? Like, why has politics gotten so divorced from reality? So that's also a big part of like what is driving people to be independents rather than partisan.
Absolutely. And then do you have anything do you want to like share with our listeners? Anything you want to add extra to our conversation today? Anything do you want to like people to know more on like independent voting or even just the Independent Center?
Excuse me. Yeah. So we would love for you to reach out. Like, we'd love to hear from you. The thing I would want people to know is you don't have to be a third party voter to be an independent. So if you're swing voting, if you're split ticket voting, that is being independent minded. And it's so important for just democracy, right? Like, I know people talk a lot about reform and what could you do to make media less polarized? Like, what could you do to make Congress behave better? And that is really hard. Like, I don't have the answer to that. But I think that just people voting according to their values, even voting for the two parties, right? Like, as a nonpartisan, that's how we can take what we have right now to make the system work better for all of us. So, feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. If you have like specific questions about a policy issue or what's going on in your state, like, we're happy to chat with you and help you sort out whatever your question is. But we're trying to make a movement. So if that sounds like you, then like reach out. We would love to talk.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I know like the work you do is so important to get people out there to learn more, to just understand, and you don't have to be only left or right in a society that has become only left and right. So I really appreciate like all the work you're putting in and how you're bringing that information to people, because it's so important. I think that a lot of our educated voters, because they cannot take the time or they're too busy to do so. It's huge to have that education for people. And I think that in itself is great. So again, thank you so much for all that work. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, Juan. It was so nice to meet you. And thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. If you are enjoying Politico, make sure to listen and follow on all podcasting platforms. If you are interested in learning more about the topic that we spoke today, follow the show notes at www.politicopod.com. Politico is an Inquisitor Media original production hosted by me, Juan Collado Díaz. If you want to learn more about the work we do on our advocacy work, make sure to follow or visit Politico at www.politicopod.com.